You didn't fall in love with cars. You fell in love with a feeling, and a video game gave it to you before real life ever had the chance. Think about this. There are people right now saving up for years to buy a specific car. Not because they test drove it, not because a friend recommended it, but because they drove it virtually at age 12 in a dark bedroom on a controller with a cracked thumbstick. And that memory never left them. That's not nostalgia. That's psychology doing something far more powerful than most people realize. The human brain doesn't fully distinguish between a real experience and a deeply immersive simulated one. When the emotional response is strong enough, when the sensory details are rich enough, the brain files that experience in the same cabinet as reality. Neuroscientists call this the mirroring of experiential memory. Your brain doesn't stamp a little label on the memory that says fake. It just stores the feeling. And feelings are what drive human behavior more than any logical decision ever will. Gran Turismo didn't sell you a game. It handed you an identity before you even knew you needed one. When adolescents between the ages of 10 and 16 engage with something deeply stimulating, the brain is in one of its most neurologically plastic states. It's forming the scaffolding of personality, preference, and passion. Dopamine is flooding the system at rates that adults simply don't experience anymore. Every time you unlocked a new car, customized it, heard that engine roar through cheap television speakers, your brain released a hit of dopamine tied directly to that machine. That reward loop ran hundreds of times. The car became synonymous with reward, with mastery, with identity. That's not a coincidence. That's classical conditioning operating at full power inside a developing brain. Pavlov did it with dogs and bells. Gran Turismo did it with teenagers and Nissan Skylines. And here's where it gets genuinely strange. Studies in emotional memory consolidation show that the emotions attached to an experience often outlast the memory of the experience itself. You might not remember exactly which race you were running. You might not remember the track or the year, but the feeling of sitting behind the wheel of a virtual Mazda RX-7 at 2 in the morning, completely in control, completely free, that feeling is still sitting somewhere inside you. And when you see that car in real life, your nervous system recognizes it before your conscious mind even processes what it's looking at. That's why grown adults get emotional in car showrooms. That's why people cry at car meets. That's why a man in his 30s will spend money he doesn't really have to own a machine he technically doesn't need. The car isn't just a car. It's a physical manifestation of an emotional experience that was imprinted during one of the most formative periods of his life. Need for Speed didn't make car enthusiasts. It revealed them. It reached into kids who didn't yet have the language for what they loved and handed them proof. There's a psychological concept called the extended self, developed by consumer behavior researcher Russell Belk. It describes how humans don't just own objects, we absorb them into our identity. We become them. And this process is dramatically accelerated when the emotional attachment begins early and runs deep. For millions of people who grew up on racing games, specific cars didn't just enter their awareness. They became part of the story those people told themselves about who they were. Ask someone who grew up playing Forza what their dream car is, they won't hesitate. They'll tell you the exact model, the exact year, sometimes the exact color. And if you ask them why, they'll say it's because it's beautiful, or it's fast, or it's iconic. But push a little deeper, and what you find underneath is a memory. A version of themselves at 12 years old who felt powerful for the first time. The car carries that feeling permanently. This is also why car manufacturers started paying close attention to gaming. Not because gamers have disposable income, although they do, but because the gaming world is where emotional brand loyalty is being formed in the most permanent way possible. Lamborghini, Porsche, Ferrari, these companies understood something before most marketing agencies caught up. If you let a child fall in love with your car in a video game, you don't need to advertise to them as an adult. The work is already done. The imprint is already there. You just have to eventually build something real enough to justify the feeling they've been carrying around for 20 years. Porsche saw a 22% increase in brand recognition among younger buyers in markets where their cars were prominently featured in racing game franchises. That's not a small number. That's a generation of people who grew up feeling something specific about a specific badge. But this goes even deeper than marketing. Some people didn't just develop a love for cars through games. They developed careers. Engineers at automotive companies who traced their path directly back to wondering how car physics worked in a game. Racing drivers who say their spatial awareness and track memory were sharpened first on a screen. Mechanics who took apart real engines because they spent thousands of hours understanding virtual ones. The simulation created genuine competence in some cases, not just passion. The brain builds real neural pathways from repeated simulated experience. A surgeon who trains on a simulator develops real surgical instinct. A pilot who trains in a flight sim builds real spatial processing skills. And a kid who spent 500 hours learning the weight distribution of a rear-wheel drive car in Gran Turismo develops a real intuitive feel for vehicle dynamics that never fully goes away. There's also something worth examining about what cars meant in those games that they often can't mean in real life. In the game, you were never too young, never too broke, never stuck in traffic. You were in full control. The car responded to your input instantly, perfectly, dramatically. Real life is slower, messier, more expensive. But the emotional template was set inside a world where the car was pure freedom, with no friction attached. So when real life offers even a fraction of that feeling, when you finally sit in the car you once only touched with a thumbstick, the emotional impact is disproportionate to what it should logically be. People describe test driving their childhood video game car as almost a spiritual experience. Some cry and feel embarrassed about it. They shouldn't. What they're experiencing is the collision of two timelines, the child who dreamed and the adult who made it real. That emotional architecture, built inside a video game, became the blueprint for real desire. And this raises something genuinely worth sitting with. We tend to think of our preferences as things we chose deliberately. We believe we develop taste through exposure, through reasoning, through lived experience. But a significant part of who you are as a person, what you want, what moves you, what you're willing to sacrifice for, was shaped during windows of time when you were young and impressionable and fully absorbed in something that felt like play. The games you played didn't just pass the time. They quietly built the architecture of your adult desires. The car you want isn't random. The feeling you're chasing has a specific origin point. And somewhere, buried in the back of your memory, there's a version of you sitting on a floor with a controller in your hands, and the car on the screen felt like yours. It still does.